They said my bog was ugly, said it dragged down property values like I just parked a rusted-out Buick in the middle of paradise. So the HOA decided, against every warning I gave, to drain it. But here's what none of them knew. Under all that quiet, glassy water, pressure had been building for decades. Methane, rock collapse, just waiting. And when it finally gave, it swallowed their perfect little street hole, like the earth itself just opened up, yawned, and laughed right in their faces. Yeah, that happened. You ever watch an entire neighborhood get humbled by nature overnight? It's a special kind of reckoning, one I wouldn't wish on most folks, but I'll admit, for some, maybe it was overdue. Let me back up a sec. The first time I laid eyes on that patch of land, I was 5 years out from retirement with the Army Corps of Engineers. I'd spent a lifetime chasing chaos, deserts, floodplains, cities that never slept. All I wanted was a little peace and quiet. Just a house that didn't have a dozen backyards staring straight into mine. The house itself, honestly, wasn't much. Yellow siding, 2-car garage, nothing you'd find on a postcard. But out back, that's where the real magic was hiding. Tall grass, moss so thick your boots left tracks, soil that's squished under your feet, all curled up in this old natural bowl locals used to call Turtle Hollow. Some folks see a bog and think mosquitoes, mud, a haven for things best left unnamed. Me? I saw life, dragonflies darting at dusk, frogs tuning up like a choir every night, air so thick with history it made you walk a little quieter out of respect. Of course, trouble found me, the way it always does, tucked inside a business envelope. 6 weeks after I moved in. Dear Mr. Bowen, per Section 8.3 of Pine Lake's Covenant, all homeowners must, well, you know the rest. Community aesthetics, property values, etc. They said my wetland was lowering values, as if anyone in the boardroom even knew what wetland meant, like they had a right to regulate something the city barely understood. I sent back a polite note. This is a wetland, not landscaping. Been here longer than your bylaws. Didn't matter. Next thing I know, they're snapping grainy photos from behind shrubs, claiming I'm breeding mosquitoes, like I was raising them on purpose for fun. Violation notice shows up with a threat. $200 a day, fine unless I restore the property to dry, aesthetically suitable condition. Whatever that means. So that's how I found myself at my very first board meeting, not to argue, just to look them in the eye. The president, Cliff Harrove, buttoned up, perfect tan, practice smile, tells me straight-faced, that's not a wetland, sir. That's an unmaintained drainage zone. I almost laughed out loud. I laid out my credentials. Army Corps, hydrology, wetland soil samples, photos, overlays from the state agency. The whole 9 yards. They dropped the Science Act real quick. We're not here to argue environmental science. We're here to ensure the community looks presentable. There was the truth. It was never about the land. It was about control. So the battle lines got drawn. I kept my head down, but started documenting everything. Set up motion sensor cameras at the back fence, recorded conversations with old-timers who remembered Turtle Hollow before the HOA, tried to turn it into a golf course, submitted appeals, cited federal guidelines, state statutes. The HOA fired back with a court date, trying to force me to remove a so-called nuisance. But it was never about mosquitoes. It was about seeing if I'd roll over, if I'd cave to pressure. Spoiler alert, I didn't. Next thing I know, 3 guys in neon vests are out back, poking around with laser levels, claiming the slope's a common area that needs regrading. I called the sheriff, filed trespassing reports, started digging into every deed and plat record I could get my hands on. Turns out that bog had been here a century before Pine Lakes, before the road, before Cliff even learned to spell covenant. What they were stirring up, I knew it could go bad, but even I didn't see how bad, not at first. After I filed the report, the HOA shifted from polite to nuclear. Final warnings zip-tied to my gate, letters accusing me of environmental negligence, more trucks idling at the end of the street. These weren't city guys, these were contractors brought in for muscle, not brains. I kept my distance, kept documenting, watched the Pine Lakes Wharf folder on my desktop grow, photos, emails, every violation. They wanted to wear me down, grind me into the dirt until I'd fold just to get some peace and quiet. But here's what they didn't get. I'd buried a wife to cancer, survived a bombing in Mosul, pulled 2 men out of a collapsed building with dust in my lungs. I don't break easy. Still, the pressure built on me and, as it turned out, under the ground. The mediation that they called was just Cliff and his board sitting behind plastic tables under harsh fluorescent lights, pretending they were some kind of tribunal. They voted, of course, to escalate fines, $250 a day, retroactive lien on my house, if unpaid. 2 days later, the real muscle showed up, diesel pumps, hard hats, hoses run right over my fence into the bog. I stormed out, showed them the boundary line, quoted state property law, called the sheriff. 3 cameras rolling. The deputy took one look, told them to wrap it up, but they'd already started. Draining even a part of that bog shifted everything. The surface cracked, the air turned sour, the frogs went dead silent. Then came the smell. Not rot, not sewage, metallic, sharp sulfur. The kind of gas you smell in places you don't want to remember, Iraq, Alaska. Methane, maybe hydrogen sulfide. The kind of gas you never want loose in a shallow basin with a row of tract homes on top. Right then, I knew we'd crossed a line. My old training kicked in. I pulled core samples, tested the soil. All that pressure, centuries of trapped gas, now looking for a way out. I sent another warning, wrote a letter, included all the data, even modeled out the gas buildup. Dropped in their box. No reply. Just another violation for unapproved scientific equipment on my property. My gas monitor pipe. They didn't care. They didn't believe. Cliff and his aviators just smirked, acting like I was the neighborhood cook. Then the heat wave hit, 102 degrees, ground drying out faster than I'd ever seen. That's when I heard it. The first sound, a deep, dull thump like the earth coughed. I knew right then that was only the beginning. Next morning, the whole street felt off. Quiet but not peaceful. More like the calm, right before a storm. The HOA, still convinced they'd won, brought in even bigger pumps, diesel vacuums, hoses snaking across my yard. I told Cliff, "You're pushing this too far." He just grinned. "It's being handled professionally." I warned him, "When this goes sideways, you'll be explaining it to the EPA." He didn't care, but the ground cared. Birds left, soil cracked. Tiny fissures crept toward the street. Gas readings climbed, 3.6 for 0.2, then 5 parts per million. Enough for an explosion if someone so much as flicked a cigarette. I warned them again. Nothing. They paved over the cracks, called it restoration. I saw kids riding scooters over those patch spots. One neighbor, Mr. Hensley, finally asked what was really going on. I told him, explained how dried peat collapses, how gas builds up. He didn't laugh. He went home and installed a motion camera that very day. Cliff didn't care. Then the real trouble hit. A shimmer in the air, methane leaking, my detector screaming. Micro collapses started. The road sweating, dark patches where the old bog used to drain. I reported everything. City, HOA, fire department. They patched the road again, called it a soil settling incident. No one listened. Not until Sunday, 3:12 a.m., when the ground gave a little pulse, windows rattled, and the sidewalk caved in. They just threw plywood over it, stuck a traffic cone in the middle. Classic. That night, Hensley's camera caught heat signatures rippling around the cracks, trails of gas venting out like the ground itself was breathing. I called an old core buddy, sent him the data. His answer, "You need to get them off that road. Now." Could go in hours. I sent urgent warnings to everyone. HOA, fire, city, EPA. Nobody budged. Then, just after sunrise, sky dull and heavy, I felt it, a tremor in my chest before I heard the blast. Boom! Like a cannon went off under the street. The ground rippled, glass shattered, alarms blared, smoke shot up where Rosecrest crossed the old bog. In seconds, the street was cratered. A fire hydrant split wide open, a Tesla half swallowed by asphalt, air thick with sulfur. People poured outside, screaming. Pure chaos. And at the center, the earth had done exactly what I warned. Bit back hard. First responders flooded in. Fire, hazmat, even a couple guys from the Department of Energy. Evacuation orders went out, news vans rolled up, and suddenly, ugly old Turtle Hollow was the only thing anyone wanted to talk about. At the emergency meeting, I finally got to lay out the science, the radar, the logs, the proof. Even the city engineer backed me up. The HOA had operated way outside its authority, pumped a wetland without a permit, destabilized the ground. Cliff tried to squirm out, but the fire marshal cut him off. What they'd done was a federal violation. Within days, subpoenas flew, board members resigned, the city froze all HOA activity, and the bog, now a crater, was suddenly everyone's concern. Lawsuits popped up, insurance claims, class actions. Some folks thanked me, some just wanted someone to blame. I didn't want revenge, I just wanted the land respected. I worked with the state, got Turtle Hollow designated as a protected ecological reserve. The land that once got me fined now bore a plaque. Kids came for field trips, neighbors planted native grasses. Cliff moved away, silent as he'd been smug before. The HOA limped along, gutted, then finally dissolved, replaced by a city administrator. Me? I became the volunteer steward, not for pay, just to make sure the land finally had a voice. Every morning I walked the trail, checked the soil, watched the frogs return, listened to the wind. Funny thing, after all that, people finally listened. To the science, to the land, to someone who bothered to care. And when a new neighbor asks me, was it worth the fight? I tell them, it's not about winning. It's about balance. About knowing that real peace means letting things live, letting things breathe, even if they don't look pretty on an HOA flyer. So, here's my question for you. What matters more? A perfect lawn or the truth beneath your feet? If you've ever stood up to people who think authority means they're always right, I want to hear your story below. Because the ground we walk on, it remembers, it forgives if you let it, but it never forgets. And neither should we. If you believe land deserves respect, drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, or share a time you stood up for what mattered. I'll be here, listening.